Hi, I'm James and welcome to another video. Today I'm going to be painting up some more Pandyman figures, or Pandyman Entertainment if we give them the full name. I'm going to paint up some of their police figures. Let's put it there so you can see what they look like. All I've done so far is I've undercoated them in black. I've then done Zental highlight in white, well, dark grey, then a lighter grey, and then I've actually, just to try and accentuate the effect, I've gone a little bit slap chop and I've used some white brushed over the top. Always trying to look at it so that the light is coming down. So these should be relatively straightforward to paint. It's a very limited palette for this. So I'm going to start with some Black Templar contrast paint. I think this one's starting to run very low. So a bit much on there. So let's start with the base figure. So you could use a really dark blue on this. One of the problems with painting black figures is the fact that they don't shade well. So I'm using the contrast paint, which I think will work around it and not give me a problem with that. That's my theory. I live in hope. If it doesn't work, what I'll do is I'll basically take the paint off and repaint them. So, all the way down there. I'll do the boots while I'm at it because they're going to be pretty much the same colour. If I want to differentiate it a bit later, what I can always do is play around with a different highlight or something over the top, just to give it that different colour. The only snag with using a black is you really don't want to get on any of the other areas, but if you do, you know, I'm not the world's best painter, and the simple approach is just to go back and paint some white on, or grey on, whatever colour you really need to get the effect. And then, nice and straightforward, you can redo it in whatever colour it should be. So we're getting a nice effect with this. Let's get the jacket underneath the high vis. Actually, we can see that's already starting to look recognisable for what it is. There's that part of the shirt or the jacket. I'm going to paint it as part of his jacket. It's just going to give a bit more differentiation. There we go. That's that done so far. Move on to the next one. Let's go one of the firearms officers. I keep dunking that too much. There's more in there than I think. So the firearms officer is a bit simpler in that I haven't got to worry about a high vis. So I can just put this on. This is the nice thing with contrast paint. It does help when you're painting something like this because it gets all of the shading done for you. Not brilliant, not perfectly, but I'm trying to paint this to a tabletop standard. That's all I'm looking to achieve. Some of you are probably far better painters than me and want to go for a higher standard. That's fine. As long as we all get something we're happy with. All I want is something that's good enough to game with on the table. Now, he's carrying an MP5. I deliberately bought the ones with MP5s rather than the G36s because I'm old-fashioned. I like the MP5. It's got a lovely feel to it. So I am going to paint up the MP5 just in plain black. So this figure has got an awful lot of black on it. I'm going to differentiate the weapons slightly when we get to the next stage, or later stage anyway. Very easy to miss parts as you're doing something like this. If you miss something, go back and do it later. Now what you need to work on the principle of is how good do you want your figures to be. Do you want to spend your time painting and getting an absolute masterpiece, or do you want to be gaming with it on the table? So that's very much down to you. I can't make that decision for you. Mine is more towards the gaming rather than the painting. So doing a quick simple paint job suits me. Strikes me that this figure could be very good as a corporate security guard if you play cyberpunk gaming. Okay, yep, that's that one done. Let's go on to the other normal policeman. I keep misjudging that. If you're going for the more traditional Bobby look, I think a bit more blue, that probably mixing it, probably a 50-50 mix. Blue and black would get you a nice effect there. Let's have a look. Oh, he has got a sleeve underneath. Just wasn't sure if that was a sleeve or not. It's cold, this one. I can almost imagine him standing next to a fire. them done. So that leaves this last one. Now this last one is probably my favourite of them, which is a Sikh firearms officer. Slightly niche figure, I suppose, but I really liked it. It was just a nice touch, and I actually found the original photo that looks like this figure's been modelled off when I did a YouTube search to see what colour they should be wearing, which was really nice. Going to mean we're going to have to look at the flesh slightly differently, but that's always useful on a video like this. Now the other difference with this figure, as opposed to the last one looking very cold, almost hugging himself, this guy is actually in shirt sleeves under his jacket. So what I'm going to do with this one, look at the weapon first, and I just love the MP5, very much the Rolls Royce of submachine guns. Now what we're going to do with this one is we're going to give him the white shirt, but we're going to give him a black vest. So, paint it very similarly. Now, because it's white, I want to be really careful to avoid getting it on the shirt. Because he's wearing a shirt, I had a good look at the original picture and painted a two example of this I found online. I am painting it differently to the ones I found online, because much as they look good, I want him to blend in more with my other figures. It's noticeable he's wearing a tie, so I'll get the tie as well there. Possibly I'll need to go back with a bit of white for that shirt. It's hard to tell. It's there, but there we go. It's looking good. And then the other thing we'll have to consider is the turban. So I'll get that there. And again, I'm just thinking of uses for this figure. Again, it's probably quite useful for a definitely got a bit of black on the shirt there. Sort of science fiction gaming, near future. If you're a Twilight 2000 gamer, you could probably use it for that. There's probably quite a few uses. We'll have to see what people come up with. If you've got any really good suggestions where we could use this, put it in the description. There we go. So that's my first colour done. That's taken a few minutes, which means it's time I can go back and do the next colour on the first figure. Although what I am going to do first is get a drink. Painting figures in a batch like this means by the time you get back to the first one, that colour should have dried. So we're going to use some Guillemot flesh, make sure the brush is nice and clean. So I'll start with our first guy. Again, I do like contrast paints for the way that they give you a lot of the shading, so you haven't got to worry about going back and doing it to the same degree. There's a bit of black I missed there. There's a few bits I missed on that one. I'll tell you what, while I'm here I'll touch those up. Don't normally do this, I normally wait and come back once I've done them. But while I'm here, since I'm going to need to paint the next colour adjacent to some of those areas. go, that's that done. What I tend to do when I'm doing the flesh is I actually tend to, so a figure like this, I'll actually go over the hair as well, and then it's got a bit of a colour to it when you put your hair colour on. Sometimes you actually then don't even need to bother with painting the hair, it just looks right. This colour's not taking anywhere near as long to do. Now we've got our Sikh, and I'm going to start with exactly the same approach. I'm going to paint the skin exactly the same as I would. Oh, that's the shirt, that's what I was going to say. I completely missed a bit there. Then I realised it was the shirt, but that's the bit where I need to go back over with some white. So I'll do that as well while I'm here. Part of that's actually, it's not as bad as I thought it is, because a lot of that is actually the stock for the weapon. So let's find a nice. I'll tell you what, you try that. Technically it's an air paint, but I'm just going to see how well that works, because I've got an idea for that. What I'm going to do, I'm actually going to go for painting in a slightly off-white colour first of all. To touch the black up on there now. Although I thought was needed doing, actually doesn't, it's the weapon stock, it's just how I was looking at it. So we've got that colour done. Let's go back now. We've got two policemen in high vis, so I'm going to use some game colour fluorescent yellow. I used some yesterday, if you watched my video on painting up the US figures, US pilot and the a bit watery policeman. So we can use what was in there, I was going to say, but I'm going to top it up because that's a little over watered now for this. So let's start with the high vis. Not a paint I've really used much, this one, so I'm interested to see how it works on a larger figure. It's still a little watery, but it's giving me a bit of shading by doing that, so I can live with that. Remember, what we're looking for is how the figure looks on the table at normal gaming distances. That's all I'm going for. I've never quite understood the people who pick up the miniature, hold it about 2 inches in front of their nose and have a good look at it. It doesn't work for me, and the end result is you're looking at something that you wouldn't look at like that in real life, so why do it that way with a miniature? Can see there already, distance wise, you could stop at that point. You have a perfectly decent gaming figure. So let's do the other one as well. Now whenever you're painting, a good tip which I tend to be lousy at is multiple thin coats are better than one thick coat. You will find something like a yellow like this, particularly if you're painting it over a black, would need to be multiple layers. This one's coming out all right. There we go, they definitely stand out with those fluorescent jackets. So, we're definitely getting there with these. So, what should we do next? Well, I think what we'll do next is we'll do a bit more on the flesh. So what I'm going to do now is get let's have a look at multiple flesh, that's the one I want. Cadian flesh tone. And a little bit of that on there. I don't want a lot on the brush this time. I don't really want it over thinned, so I'm going to use this one fairly neat. What I'm going to do is pick out the highlighted areas on the hands and the face. So I've got the back of the palm, run it loosely across the fingers, almost a dry brush, and get up to the face. So we're painting basically anywhere that's not recessed. Not looking for perfection again, but again just to give an impression. That impression is what makes the difference. The brain is very good at filling in what it doesn't really see. It's amazing how little the brain actually does see when you look into it. Most of what we're seeing outside a very, very narrow area is actually our brain telling us what it expects to see. Now we come to the skin tones for the Sikh figure. What I'm going to do exactly the same. But with the others, when I'm then going to go to lighter shades, this is the last shade I'm going to do on this. And because he's got a lot more skin exposed, we need to make sure we get it to differentiate the different colours. So it's not all just done on shading on this one. This one you have to rely a little bit more on getting the next colour onto it. There we go. Not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but from a gaming perspective it's good enough. So we need to give that time to dry now. So what we're going to do is go back and look at the badges. So I've got a little bit of silver for this one. Okay, I don't want this to be very watery, and this unfortunately is a very watery paint. That's possibly way too watery. Let's try it. Oh no, I can get away with that. And that one little bit there of colour just marks that figure out a little bit more. And what I'm going to do with the weapons, I'm going to go back to the weapons, And what I'm going to do is, magazines tend to be a different colour. So I'm going to put the magazine in that colour, and I'm also going to give then a very light dry brush over it as well, just to give it a bit of a gunmetal look. I mean, you could use gunmetal paint for this, but because this figure is so dark, I'm going to paint it a bit unrealistically and make the weapons stand out. You can see what I mean there, the weapon stands out a bit more. The Sikh figure would actually have his police badge at the top as well, so I need to put that in. Again, what we're going to do is lightly brush that over the weapon. Plenty on the magazine. That's looking quite good. So, we're getting there with these very quickly. So what we'll do now, we'll go back and do another layer of flesh. Now this time what I'm going to do is switch to using Kislev flesh. And because these, the way I want them to apply, I'm not using the wet palette. I'm trying to get a very nice thick paint. These, just a little tiny drop there. And now what I'm going to do is go back to where I painted the brighter colour earlier and highlight that. A lot less this time. Try and leave as much as I can in the recesses. There we go, that's looking quite nice there. I'm quite pleased with that. Putting a little bit more on this figure because I just feel when I look at that figure it's very dark. I need to try and do something to brighten it up a little. I'll try to see what I can think of to do with that one in a minute. And like I said, this last one, the Sikh, I'm going to leave as is, so you can actually see there is now a slight colour differentiation between the two. So I think what we'll do now is get start the bases. So I'm going to change brushes because I don't want to use a particularly good brush when I'm doing the base. It's going to involve, in all honesty, plastering it on. So what am I going to use for the base colour? Normally I'd go for the black, and I think I'm going to anyway, because what I'm going to do is then differentiate it by dry brushing it. So leave the side for the minute. Nice thing with this is if I catch the feet with this one, I haven't got to worry because it's the same colour I was using when I painted them. I might have to touch up a couple of bits there, still haven't picked up. So I'll get to where it goes over the edge like that. Makes it look a bit bland at the minute, but I'm going to improve on that as we go. This is going to look very dark, this figure, but I I've got a couple of ideas that I'm going to use to make it look a bit brighter. Thinking it through, what I really should have done is done this when I was doing the base colour on the figure. I could have saved myself a stage there. Oh well. I'll just look at that. So let's do a bit of touching up actually. There we go. So that's the bases started. Let's go back and do the next colour. What I'm going to do with this one is I'm going to go back and do the last layer of flesh. I'm going to use the, I've used that one already, where is it gone? Elder flesh. Now it is intended as a dry brush. I found, while it works as a dry brush, what I want is to more edge highlight with it. So again, what we're going to do, just tiniest little bit now, just on the really standout areas. So it literally is minimal, which we're putting on. Strikes me I could have done this figure with gloves on, but that would have made it even darker. I think it's probably a good job I'm painting it without gloves. Okay, there we go. And again, I'm going to skip the Sikh figure. Okay, time for the really important step now, a bit more of the tea. Now what we need to do is to brighten those bases up a little. So let's find the colour I'm looking for. In fact, I tell you what, I'm going to break out some new paints that I've not tried. I've got some. Oops, I've got some Vallejo metallics. Yeah. So I haven't tested these, so I don't know how they'll work. Let's have a look. Which one am I going to go? There we go. What a nice bright colour for this. Vallejo polished gold. That looks like the ideal one for this. So, give it a shake. Don't know how consistent this is, so this is a please let this work moment. Worst case, you paint over and redo. Just want a little drop of this. What we're going to do for the two firearms figures, I think I only put it their bases. Yep, you'll see that their bases have actually got some cartridge cases on the floor. They're a little over scale for this. I think these, when I printed these bases out, they're designed more for Warhammer, so the rounds tend to be a bit bigger. They're certainly bigger than the 9mm that I would be expecting on the floor, at least based on what weapon he's carrying. Even if I argued that he'd used the 10mm version or something like that, they're still a bit big, but hey, they give nice little bit of colour to an otherwise quite drab base, although I probably should have finished the base before I did that, but at least I can see where they are when I come back to them. And there's a couple, I believe, on this one as well. Oops, missed a bit there. If I leave that in there, at least I can always come back and do those again if I need to. Okay, it's added that little bit of an interest to the base. So, what have we got left to do then? Let's have a look. Well, let's do some work on the base. We said that that's the big thing. So what I'm going to do, give those time to dry. Quite like the Vallejo there. We're going to dry brush the base. I'm going to use my standard go-to for this, which is Longbeard Grey. I absolutely love Longbeard Grey from Games Workshop. This will dry brush so many things. And to put it on, I'm not actually going to use a paintbrush. I'm actually going to use a makeup brush. Pound shop, best place to get stuff like this. So we'll put a bit on, get the bulk of it off, then just dry brush over the top. I think that's actually got a bit, do a bit more on there. Just dapple it on like that, see how that looks. What I'm going for is a nice sort of tarmac type look, and it does differentiate, as you can see, from what we had earlier, where it was just the same as the figure. So there we go. So that was a little bit wet, but it has given a little bit of a nice effect as a result. I can live with that. I'll need to touch that one up in a minute. Let's try this one more. This one, there we go. It's actually painting it, which I wasn't going to go for, but never mind. So much for the dry brushing. Okay, we'll dapple that on a bit, so we'll have to come back and pick up the bits there. Sometimes you do something like this and it actually works out despite your best efforts. Let's try that now. Actually, that's gone all right around the bullets there. This one's got a bit of a rock, so I can put a bit more onto that. That's not bad, I can live with that. So I'm probably going to come back and revisit them in a little bit. Let's have a look now if there's anything else I still want to pick up on these figures. Okay, now he's got a panel on the back, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back to that with some black paint. And what I'm going to use, I'm not going to use the contrast this time, I'm going to use the really old Citadel colour. Now this I must have bought in, I was trying to work it out for a previous video, about 1990. And I've still got some left, mainly because it got tucked in the bottom of a box and forgotten about for a long time. So where he's got the panel there, paint that black. A little bit over, it's annoying. Not the world's best painter, as I say. I'm probably going to have to come back and touch up that yellow, but I'm probably going to have to touch it up with another colour as well. Nice white undercut, it's come out better on that one. Okay, now these obviously haven't got that, so I don't need to worry about that in the same way. That's already black that I need to be in, and that one is as well. Okay, so I'll let that bit dry on those. Now what I'm going to do is go back to this one. I think I'm going to do something with that rock type effect. I think so. know what, I'm going to leave that to dry a bit more. Let's do the hair colour. Now he needs some colour, so I'm going to give him nice bright yellow hair. Now remember what we said, this doesn't work particularly well because it's a yellow over black, so this might take more than one coat. But that has now given me a bit more colour on that figure. Okay, so let's have a look for hair colour for the others. So I've got my Sikh, and where do we, let's have a look. Yep, Basilicum Grey, I'm going to use that for him. So let's paint beard in, and the moustache. And that's done it quite nicely. So let's use a bit of white now and just touch up those sleeves on him. So which white am I going to use? Use the white scar. Again, it's supposed to be a layer, but it has separated a bit on mine, which is actually potentially quite useful. So just as we did with the flesh, effectively what this is going to be is a little bit of a highlight over what's already there. Picking up all the raised areas. What I'm going to do is just at the base of his turban put a white patch in there. It can be any colour, the look of it. Examples I've seen of blue, but the white's just going to give me that little bit more to it, I think. Okay. So I need to do something about that black. I don't know if it's going to be dry enough yet, but if I just put some white in there. No, it's not quite dried enough yet. I'll have to give that a minute or two. So let's go back to the base, and what I'm going to do is now go for a white dry brush, I think. Change to this brush, the one that I'm less worried about. So dry brushing does kill your brushes. It's a bit watery there. Let's try that. Still very watery. Let's change for a different white. Let's have a look. What have I got? There we go. I've got Corax white. That's definitely a darker. Tougher paint, so let's have a look. So let's start with that one that had the rock, because if we lighten that one up, I think that'll look nice. Probably over brushing there rather than dry brushing, but actually it differentiates it a bit. So let's get some more of that off. Still too much on there. Probably have to bring this back down afterwards. Never mind. This time make sure I get right into between the feet. And I've got a bit much over the feet. That's not gone well, that one. Let's get more like what I want, just to give a bit more differentiation there. That's why you always make sure that your paints are closed. That's that one done. Let's go back and try the white. This will actually probably be better to reapplying that undercut. Anywhere where I've got the black over it, just put the white there. I'll give that a minute to dry. What I'm going to do while we're doing that is I'm going to touch up any of the black that I've painted over by accident. This is definitely a case where you want plenty of the black paint. So I find with this, if you do all of the touching up on block, end result is you get much easier life. You're not constantly going back and correcting it when you do it. So do it at the end. Hopefully you've enjoyed the video. If you have, please click on the like button below so that I know what people like and I know what to make more of. Alternatively, if you've enjoyed it and think you'd like to see more, please click on the subscribe button. That way you get notified by YouTube whenever I bring out a new video. And you never know, there might be something in there that you hadn't considered, because I do cover a variety of things on the channel. And finally, if you have a little bit of cash going, I now have a Patreon account. I'm always looking for patrons, because at the end of the day, let's be perfectly honest, it's a good way for me to get a little bit of money that will use to buy review items or to travel to museums and so on. I don't put a huge amount on that. At the minute, all we've got is one tier charging £1 a month, which just, as I say, helps cover my costs. See you soon.